So yes, so tonight we're going to be talking about morals and ethics in technology, and as it says, that medium, we don't get away from it. So what we're going to do, we're going to explore some of the ethical and moral dimensions of technology and software, and look at what it actually means when we talk about things being ethical or moral, and look at some of the tools and techniques that we can use to help us. The way we're going to do it, we'll give you a brief introduction and some context. We'll talk about some tools for the theoretics behind ethics, and then you're going to do some work. So we're going to break up into a workshop where you will be able to explore some of the moral and ethical aspects of technology. And then we'll bring that back together and get your feedback from your groups. And then we're going to lighten it up with a little bit of a game show. Are these ethical scenarios real or not real? Okay, so why do we need to care about ethics when we're talking about technology? Technology is evolving at a tremendous rate. It's now starting to touch our lives in ways that we didn't imagine were possible years gone by. And so technology now literally able to kill people or make huge impacts on their lives. And it's not just as straightforward as the harm of causing death. It can cause damage to people's livelihoods, leakage of data, or the way that they can be perceived in society. So we might be talking about things like automation. What happens in automation to not only to the people whose jobs are being automated to make their lives easier, what happens to people whose jobs are displaced because of automation? Fields of artificial intelligence. Are we accidentally or even deliberately encoding our own biases into artificial intelligence and causing discrimination? When we look at data, we're grabbing data from all over the place now. Are there implications for that around privacy? Some of these, while these things are new in terms of the technology, the evolution of ethics is something that's been going on for a long time. People had to make these decisions over many years. When the Industrial Revolution came along, people had to think about the impact of industrialisation, factories, on the way it changed our society. We had to look at things when medicine has evolved in the fields of embryology. Human embryo research is causing all sorts of ethical questions that people are having to stretch the boundaries. When it's easy to do the right thing because it isn't technically possible to do anything else, then there's no real debate. But as society is having to, as the technology evolves faster than we can understand how it behaves, society maybe hasn't had a chance to make those decisions yet about what's the right thing to do, and maybe it starts to come back to individuals to work out how to behave.
So Debbie's just given a very coherent and well thought out discussion about the context about ethics and morals and how they impact on software. Mine's more of a rant, essentially, because the origins of this workshop are with a guy called John Nolan. So not John O'Nolan, that's who I know, but John S. Nolan, who's got a wild and big-haired guy. And he ran a workshop donkeys years ago. And I got reminded of it a couple of years ago when I went to a session by Emma Coleman, who talks about ethics and technology. And it's that sort of thing so when John and I sort of ran a similar workshop about 12 months ago, we said, okay, what sort of context? So we said, so because we're both ranty type people, we said, we should do have a bit of a rant about it. Now, when you look up rants of, so I can't remember what the term was, but sort of sort of manic ranting and this sort of thing. These are the pictures that come up on the internet. So this is just for eye candy, and you quite understand why, when you look at ranting, these are the sort of people. But it's worth ranting about this because it does impact on us all. And the thing about this is that it's very easy to say, well, it's not my concern. It's not, I just write the technology, I just write the code and this sort of thing. It's not my concern. And then I could have taken this route. I could have said, okay, I don't care. It's not my concern. But over the years, I've noticed I've made particular decisions. I made decisions like I used to work for Francis years ago before they imploded because they thought they were a big company and bought somebody financially. But they built, amongst other things, weapon systems, and that's what we've been working on if I joined them. I sort of went for an interview at Bet365, and then I walked out and thought, do I really want to be working at Bet365? Obviously, anybody who's working for Bet365, that's entirely your concern. But for me, I thought, maybe not. So it's that sort of thing. Individually, we can make decisions about what we do and what we don't do. And it's very easy to say, well, if I don't do it, somebody else will. But there is that question of, well, they might do, but, let's egos aside, they might not do it quite as well as you. So, you've got to think about that. You do bear some individual responsibility for the sort of things you do and the businesses you're involved in. There is not a tech divide between the business. We talk about the tech people and the business. You are the business. If you're paid by the business, you are the business. And so you take the equal moral responsibility for the things you produce. No, enough of that. So, how ethical are you?
So, we sent out a survey, and we had a fair few people fill it in. Our survey says, and that's the game show thing. So we got quite a number of people who responded. We've set out a set of, I think, 5 industry sectors that we've suggested, perhaps slightly biasedly, might not be ethical to work for, in terms of gambling, alcohol, tobacco, arms manufacture, and pornography. And then we left a question say others. So we got a variety of responses for others. So people talking about banking or fossil fuels, sort of environmental concerns, animal agriculture was in there, politicians, finance, wasteful charities, which is an interesting one. So yes, there were various things. And then we also asked 3 questions about your own personal experience of ethics in your workplace. We asked people whether they ever actually challenged something based on their ethics, and the majority said that they had. Have you ever left a job because of an ethical conflict? The vast majority hadn't. And have you ever done something against your ethics? Again, the majority said no. So, broadly speaking, sounds like they're very ethical.
We think we're yes.
Okay, session.
Okay, blank screen. Okay, so one of the things again when John and I sort of worked on that initial workshop, we're bringing out various examples from that from an experience. So apologies for some of them. This is not being mine. That's why I mentioned it. So the one of the things we both heard, but basically that's not for you to decide. That's a business decision. And again, it's just okay. We are part of the business. We've got to claim being part of the business as well. People say that to you. It's worth trying to point out to them, not necessarily sort of face to face for the people, so head to head for the people who've made that sort of call, but over time, persuading them that you are part of the business and you have got a valid vote in there, even if you're voting with your feet. That's not our call. It'd be cool. We could make lots of money. This is a startup thing. Hey, we're Uber and this sort of thing. Yeah, we've got local rules about taxis and this sort of thing. But if that disappears, that's not our call. That's not our problem. We displace loads of people. We get rid of hotel business by Airbnb. That's not our problem. But we'll do some really cool stuff with technology. So again, we've got a choice in this because we are the people who are bringing the technology. It's our responsibility to come up with ideas and not to decide how they're used. This was one that John had thrown at him when he was working I think it was with the US Navy or something like that. It's on a contract thing where they were engaging with them. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Heard that again recently, haven't we? So again, we can't abdicate the responsibility. Well, the systems we build, if we understand how they are going to be used, we can't wash our hands of them. That would be my tip. So, going into morals and ethics, it's worth just working for clarification, and because we're a whole bunch of people with different backgrounds coming in here, just making sure we understand have a common understanding of what we mean by morals and ethics. Otherwise, we'll spend more time debating that than actually looking at the examples and making a judgment. So, for the purposes of the next hour and a half or so, morals is about me, what I feel comfortable with, what I think is what I should do, and what I don't think I should do. Ethics is everyone else. So it's a question of a certain context, whether that's society as a whole, whether that's your organisation, whether that's your team, whether that's your profession, like doctors and so on, having a code of ethics and so on. So with some sort of society, some sort of grouping you are a part of, do you think that's what wouldn't be approved by that grouping? So these are morals, basically, are the things you want to do, and the ethics potentially are the things you feel you ought to do because other people will judge you based on that. So, are you going to pick up this?
No, it's you.
Is it me? Okay, fine. Yes, you're right. This is me. Yes, that's fine. Well-oiled. Right. Okay, so what we're going to do then is we're going to say we've got moral and ethical, and we've got non-moral and non-ethical. This gets rid of all the immoral, amoral, all that sort of stuff. I'm not concerned about people, dancing. I mean, a lot of people in here are very technical. If you throw something like that at people, they'll be arguing for hours on whether it's immoral or amoral, this sort of thing. I was in one of those discussions earlier on this today, had to cut it short. So, basically, non-moral, non-ethical. And then we say, right, things are morally neutral or ethically neutral. So you've got those, the three buckets you can put them in, whether you consider something to be ethical, ethically neutral or non-ethical. Okay? So what we're then going to do is produce, it's like consulting organisations, everybody's got to have some sort of quadrants or this sort of thing. So these are in fact, I think the official term would be nonants, because there are 9 of them. And basically, you've got ethical, ethically neutral and non-ethical at the top, moral, morally neutral and non-moral along the side. And basically you get a set of quadrants you can place things in. So, if you take, for example, Wikipedia, it's a good thing for humankind. It's a great source of knowledge and this sort of thing. And even like the crap that appears in some places in Wikipedia. So you'd probably say, most people might well say, that morally they feel it's a good thing, morally they approve of it, and ethically it's a good thing to have. WikiLeaks, on the other hand, might cause some more questions from people. Is it ethical or is it not ethical? Well, it depends on your stance, whether you're with the people who are being leaked or not with the people who are being leaked. Is it, morally, do you approve of it but don't think it's ethically, one way or the other? It's like, you're not too concerned about its impacts. Or do you think, well, society as a whole, I'm not going to make a judgment, but personally, I don't think they should be leaking stuff like that. Because, think of your opinion on the thing about whether people in combat situations might die on the basis of the information and so on, so all this sort of thing. Or you may say, it's not concerning. So what we're going to look at is some scenarios and try and make this sort of decision. But the thing here is it's not asking you as a group to make the decision, it's asking a combination of your own opinion of what you think is ethical or moral. So as an individual, and then look as a group how that plays out. Volkswagen, wonderful cars. Obviously the emissions scandal a few months ago. Most people may well say that was not moral and it was not ethical to make the change to the emissions that they did. However, some people may make an argument that because it sold a bunch of newer cars, the emissions of those newer cars were still better than the older cars they replaced, and therefore, you could argue that morally you feel a bit happier about it, and it was in fact an ethical thing to do. It's very much on your own opinion and what you think you can argue here as to whether you think, what you think is moral and ethical from your viewpoint. Now,
Okay, so some tools that you might look at when deciding whether things are ethical or not. So over the years people have studied ethics and come up with some theoretical stances on ethics. So there is a school of thought that talks about taking the action that results in the greatest good. This is the utilitarian school of thought. And then the opposite, the contrary to that, we have the stance that some actions are right, some actions are wrong, so this is more that's the action in itself that matters. This is the Kantian view. So you've got this kind of, the end justifies the means versus the action itself. And it's quite well illustrated with the example of torture. So you could say that you can justify torture as long as it's acting for a greater good, which that it saves more lives. Or you could take the opposite stance, no torture, no matter what, is never right. There is another group of thinking, the deontological, which basically says that because of who you are, because of your, because of the way you are, you have a duty to act in a certain way. This way might not be codified, but you have a duty to act in a certain way. So perhaps as an MP, for example, you have a duty to behave in a certain way. Controversial there as well. Okay.
Okay. So what we're going to do is we're getting towards the point where we're going to ask you folks to do something and to explore your own opinions on some of this stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to provide you with a flip chart sheet which is split out into these nodes. And what we're going to suggest to you is that you start one again. Right. What we're going to provide to you is one of these flip chart sheets. What we're going to also provide is a set of scenarios. So each of those scenarios, you've got to decide if it's ethical, neutral, non-ethical, moral, neutral, non-moral, and decide where you're going to put it. Now, the reason why I stalled was I realised I haven't actually put these letters on the different quadrants in the flip chart, so we need to quickly do that when we're handing them out. Now, the idea here is that then what you can do is you can say, right, scenario 1. And what we're going to do is we're going to hand out little post-its in different colours, so everybody on the team will have a different colour. Everybody in the group will have a different colour. And what you'll do is, so if you're yellow, you'll say, right, for scenario 1, I think that is, moral and neutral, so I'll put that in D. Now, what we're going to want to do is we're going to try and avoid any biases as somebody puts it in. So, if you read it out as a group, yeah, and then somebody's like, when we're going to put it, and somebody goes, right, I'm going to put that in D, and then, yeah, okay, I'll put it in D, and that sort of thing. So, ideally, what you'll do is you'll write on the post-it the number of the scenario, and you'll also make a note on your post-it for which node you would put that in. And then effectively, like on the count of 3 sort of thing, you can all put it in here when you're all ready, you can put it in together and put them in the appropriate place. Just experimenting with this, see if it gives a less of a leader-follower sort of thing. Right, so what we should end up with then is, once you've made those decisions, is a whole bunch of, so after the first one, so scenario 1, you might end up with a cluster like this, scenario 2, you might end up with a cluster like that, and then so on and so on. So one of the things you can then do is, once you've done this, is you can to look for patterns in this. Because they're different colours, is one person skewing in a particular direction? Yes, so we can discuss why. Are particular scenarios numbered skewing in a particular direction? And therefore you can ask, why is that particular scenario, is everybody for scenario 1 up here, apart from one person who's right down there, and then you can have a little discussion about why. Why there's a difference of opinion. Yeah, no fighting, no arguments. Okay, so the next bit after that is, okay, if we're seeing patterns, once we've had a bit of a discussion around the patterns, we can then say, okay, what actions can we take presuming we want things to be more ethical and more moral, what actions can we take to move things up towards that quadrant? So if faced with any of these scenarios, what could you actually do to stop that or reduce the effect of it? And the other thing is, what thoughts and puzzles do we have? If we're going through this, why, if there is a huge discrepancy in opinion, why is that? So, maybe we bring that up. Now, the objective of this at the end of the workshop bit, is that each group will have about 4 minutes to play back their stuff to the other groups. So, showing what your scatter graph looks like, and also what the main issues and puzzles and that sort of thing are. So, first, this is the group. So, organise into groups. So we'll spend, we'll spend 20 minutes going through the scenarios. Now, we will give you 15 scenarios. We will give you we'll say at 10 minutes of that, we'd say you should have tried to put the scenarios out. So it should be quite rapid fire. Don't spend ages discussing particular scenarios like, yeah, we did one in 10 minutes. I know, that's not the point. The point is like, read the scenario, one of you in the group, read the scenario out. Everybody say, okay, if there's anything sort of slight question or this sort of thing, quickly, try and address it, like what do you mean by X and this sort of thing. And then say, okay, now write and post it out, and then 3, 2, 1, stick it down. So trying to get, you don't have to get all 15 done in 10 minutes, but as many as you can get through in 10 minutes to get onto that scatter graph to give you your basis of discussion. Then discuss the differences. So then sort of work out what the reasons are for the differences and this sort of thing, and then get on to what can be done. So what sort of things can you do in order to address some of those scenarios? So spend about another 10-15 minutes on that. After that, we'll then present it back. So that's when we'll call time and we'll say, right, could each team present back their scatter graph and also what they mainly disagreed about or what they thought were still puzzled by, and also what they thought can be done to address it. We'll collate the different tools of that. So note as we go through the things that people suggest, and so if it's already come up, then skip over and just add in what you can. We'll go random grouping, start in the middle. So, what did you get out of your analysis?
We failed a bit. Most of our stuff was down in the bottom right.
Okay.
And then we started talking about kind of ownership of data and, if it's recorded, it'll get shared and all of that kind of. That was where our discussion went, I think.
Okay, so
and we had a sort of realisation that part of the problem on a lot of them, like the wearable lie detector and the funny photo taker, which also detected suicidal tendencies, was a lack of consent from people you might use this on. So whilst you owning it might be completely fine with this, no one who you are necessarily using it on has given any consent.
Yes.
Which was a problem for us.
And for GDPR. Yes. Okay, so were there any bits, any particular things where you had wild differences of opinion, any skewing in the group and that sort of thing?
We did talk quite a bit about the perfect encrypted messaging and funny photos. And yeah, we also disagreed on also the funny photo.
Okay.
Which was the biggest one.
All right.
Yeah, so with the funny photos one, we pretty much had opinions in each of the extremities.
Okay, interesting.
Except ethical and non-moral. And one in the middle as well. So they pretty much had the entire spread of opinions on the funny photo.
A balanced group. So in terms of for the places where you presented with something that you don't think is ethical and moral, what sort of tools and approaches did you come up with that you might use or approach you might take to get yourselves out of that situation and make it better?
I think, with the discussion, I think we decided that a large amount of the spread was down to an assumption on some people's part that the data was not identifiable to anyone.
Okay.
Whereas other people had assumed that maybe it was. But someone did the very good point that, of course, it was a photo of someone's face, so that's pretty identifiable.
Yeah, personal identifiable, as that goes, yes, it is fairly personal identifiable.
So obviously the upshot of that was the idea that making things anonymous, aggregating results, and not being able to personally identify people.
Okay. Okay. So that was it. Any approaches, anything you'd personally do to address those moral ethical dilemmas, or is it more into? Did you discuss around how you would change the technology and that sort of thing to do, as you say, with the anonymisation?
Yeah.
We didn't get far into any solutions.
Okay, that's fine. Okay, right. Wheel of Random Fortune goes that way. So. Again, same set of questions. What did you find puzzling, interesting spreads, differences of opinion?
I guess we found disparity on 5 and 6. So again, funny photos one, and also the user tracking one for marketing, so registered users.
Okay.
Where did we get to? So some of those photos very unethical and immoral. And a couple of photos was okay.
What they're trying to say is I'm moral and cruel.
I didn't want to release that.
You want to say that? I couldn't possibly comment. Okay. So, in terms of what did you think in terms of
Don't worry about that, that's fine, that was neutral.
that was neutral. Okay. So, what have you got in terms of your? These are your approaches.
So these are our solutions,
Yeah.
I suppose.
Okay.
So for something that we found that was pretty reprehensible was the whole being part of the whistleblower identification team, which we're already inside, unfortunately, and it's a bit of a hole. We asked the question, well, what could we do to make that more?
Interview there.
We're already in the team. How can we make that more? And I think the solution that we came up with, James, was?
Quit and maybe whistleblower.
Yeah, it's in public. It's that making things visible.
Yeah, just informing, another one that around 6, just informing users about what's happening. Like Facebook is, you've got to sign a consent thing, nobody reads it, but what else can you do? Like you can do, people can't help to read it.
Yeah, and also a lot of this data over time can actually be useful for tracking people. There should be opt-out mechanisms or opt-in mechanisms for GDPR. And also the ability to delete the data if you want that. And also the frequency at which you want to share this kind of update that data.
So part of 6 was like actually informing users how to not be part of it, giving the instructions of turning off.
So making it more visible to people and giving it some sunlight so they actually understand more about what they're getting
The
involved
implications around it.
We'll make it more public so they can remain more private.
with. Indeed.
Then number 2, which was you're part of a team to deliver the security system which guarantees identity theft, no identity theft, sorry, and you have to get all that data over to the government. I'll Anthony explain that one.
Well, yeah, I think we came up with a technical solution to that to make it more, and that was to use asymmetric cryptography, where basically the customer would have a private key to their data in the system. So that would be the data that can be used to identify them somehow. So that if the government requests what data you have, you can't decrypt it, you don't have the key, but you can happily shovel them over this encrypted data, but no subpoena can get that company to release that data on account that they can't actually do it.
So users still learn the data.
But I don't know how such a service could continue to operate, yeah, if it can't look at the data. So it's a question, isn't it? Yeah. Maybe it's in browser or something.
Okay. What I'll do is just move on, just sort of hop on. Is there anything that doesn't well, is there anything left that doesn't want to throw it at the end? Okay, so table at the back, please.
Yeah, I think for quite a few of these we found that we were generally aligned on either moral and then spread out over ethics, or aligned on ethics and spread out over moral, which was quite interesting. Generally I feel like we tended to align quite well on stuff, and we tended to agree when we were having actual discussions. One that was, yeah, we all completely agreed on was number 4. We decided that you should leak more. Screw the CEO, just leak more, because he's not a very nice person. Yeah, go for it. Number 5, I think David had quite an insightful perspective on this. The one about the funny photos and the study on depression and suicidal impulses. Which was that maybe the issue with this is about the lack of intervention, and the company should be working on humanising the study and helping the people who are better suited to intervene in order to be able to do so. So they have this information, they have it available in a scientific context, and they can create a study that's beneficial in an anonymous way, but maybe they can also leverage that information to help individual users as well.
Okay. Okay. Cool, thank you. Yeah. Okay, let's just carry on going around then. Table back.
Yeah, well, so we basically didn't have anything down the bottom left. All our stuff was kind of either yes.
It's an interesting pattern. If you look round, there's at least 3 groups who've got almost exactly the same pattern.
I guess we've written down some of the, we've kind of focused quite a lot on the solutions to some of these problems, right? I can't quite read it right.
Oh yes. Yeah, I think we had like one of the solutions that's nobody mentioned before for number 3 was to open source it. So that if you make it all open source and people examine that and they know what's going on underneath.
So again, it's more sunlight, more transparency. Yes.
Yeah. So open source and stuff like it's a bit like Linux. So encryption and that is kind of like everyone can see it. It's still secure.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
What else do we have?
You also said that the CEO, right, you said that one of the things you do is he would only be allowed to have that information if you published information about him as well.
Okay, interesting blackmail, yes.
I think a lot of it is around telling people that you're gathering the data, allowing them to opt in and opt out. One of the things we said about 6 was, depending on your viewpoint on consumerism, a few steps, wasn't it? Whether you actually agree consumerism is good or bad. And Amazon do that, so online people who've already got the tracking your customers through the shops. So it's just doing that in the real world. And that was one of our viewpoints, wasn't it?
Yeah, you basically you go to shops to try and not be tracked, but you're being tracked in the shops. What do you do? Black market.
Cash over.
Okay.
We didn't really get very far on the second page.
That's fine, that's fine.
And then we started talking about is capitalism moral?
I think that's probably a down the pub question. Okay, so thank you for that. So on the group here.
So we were pretty well spread out really. Again, we haven't much down the bottom left. There was one that we pretty much all agreed on, at least relatively so, was the one about the CEO. I think that's the majority of people would agree with that. The one we did have quite a bit of debate about was the one to do with things like government surveillance. Obviously that's a pretty standard debate, whether it's better to have the government with more data so they can track criminals, whether you want your data out in the first place. So,
value criminal, yes.
well, yeah, exactly. There's lots of different things that go on there, but I think in general for all of these, they're deliberately done so they can never be clean cut. So there's always like a bit of spread, and they always average to at least close to the middle. So when it comes to how you can make them more ethical, it's a little bit hard, but it depends on where you stand on the issue. So we came up with a few things. So the thing is like collecting data, as a few other people have said, like stuff like opting in rather than just doing it without people's consent.
Okay.
Public consultation, so to make sure the public are aware they don't think of doing any sort of surveillance or anything like that. What's that?
It was also kind of more, well, as well as that, to sort of maybe modify what you're doing. If you put a public consultation out and people shoot it down in flames, then all right, maybe we need to change the plan a bit, or tweak it, or do whatever, so to react to the public idea or something. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you very much for that. So it's interesting. Two things are interesting. One, as I say, is the spread. So I noticed that some people last we ran this Agile Manchester earlier in the year, and it's interesting. We split the groups then by by experience rather. So less experience, more experience. The more experienced groups, funnily enough, tended to have a barbell effect, where a lot of stuff was at top left, a lot of stuff was at bottom right, and not a lot in the middle. And maybe you've got more opinionated people in that workshop. So it's interesting, and it's interesting here that we've got about 3 groups with that like inverted R shape, where there isn't a lot in the bottom left corner, and there's not a huge amount in the middle, but it loops around the rest of it. So. So, we're into the final straight, you'll be glad to know, on this. Right. Sorry. Right, so what we'd like now, to finish this off, we would like to run a real or not real, which has got no relation at all to anything no level to it. So what we're going to do is we're going to ask for 2 volunteers to be the competitors in real or not real. So we've got 2 volunteers to be competitors. Go on, okay, so you have Post-it and Sharpie. Post-it and Sharpie. So what we're going to do is we're going to give you some scenarios, and what you've got to do is you have got to decide whether they are real or not real. Now what you can do here, so we'll read you the scenario, you then got a choice, you can either write down then an R for real or an N for not real. If you're not sure, you can ask the audience, but only when I say you can ask the audience, okay? So basically if you decide you're going to write it yourself, and put your pen down, then if you get it right, you get 2 points. If you have to ask the audience and you get it right, you only get 1 point. Obviously, if you don't get it right, you get no points. Okay? So basically, you've got to look at, are these scenarios real or not real? So,
Are we ready?
first scenario.
Scenario number 1. A system that uses web advertising mechanisms to provide a service that allows a customer at the cost of $1,000 to track an individual's browsing on the web.
Was chat app real?
Answers?
So, is anyone putting the pen down? If you're not going to ask the audience, okay? Right. So, what do you say? Is that real? Real. Well, this is interesting because one of the problems we have with the not real ones, we know some things that are not real, but the people can obviously in the audience, potentially people wrong and say, yeah, we're doing that. Okay, so that was actually based on a study done by the University of
Just got
UOW.
Westminster.
Washington, yeah. They did a study on that you could do it, but nobody's actually offering it as a product at that point in time.
It's possible, guys.
It is entirely possible, but it is not real.
We'll find it on the dark web.
Indeed, yes.
Someone will be doing it.
Yeah, somebody will be doing it. But this is the problem with all of these things, they probably can say somebody's doing it somewhere. We've got to have proof. Okay, so next one.
Next one, are we ready?
Yep.
Okay. A syndicate uses reverse engineering to work out when gaming machines are about to pay out, which allows them to harvest most of their payouts.
Yeah, so gambling, yeah, so like the one-arm bandits you have on the casinos and that sort of thing.
Casinos is really, there's a lot of spells in there if you
Okay, so have you decided, so nobody's trusting your audience. I noticed this was happening. Okay, so real or not real? Real. It is in fact real. You can find it in Wired. About 12 or 18 months ago, there was a report in Wired on some people in Russia, I think, or Ukraine, who bought an old gambling machine, reverse engineered it, they were going around with their iPhones and real-time analysing the sequences and working out what's about to pay out. Yes.
Perform in a certain way, and we should do that.
So the thing here is that, as people may or may not know, casinos basically are guaranteed to make money off the public. But the people doing this analysis were the ones who got arrested. Think of that what you will. Okay. Next scenario.
Okay, ready? Okay. You're part of a team delivering an app for a wearable device that will mean the user will be able to know if the person they are talking to is lying. 80%.
I got one. Yeah, done.
Am I able to ask the audience?
You are? You can ask the audience, so have you done things? So you put your pen down?
I'm going to decide, yeah.
Yeah, so, okay, fine, so you've got your, right.
So I can ask the audience.
Chickens.
Real.
Nice.
So who thinks it's real? If you think it's real, so one on the count of three, so 1, 2, 3.
Wearable polygraph.
Real.
Yeah? So it's not real, and the council says saying not real.
No, not really.
So that's a not real.
That's a not real. So Vince, yours was not real. And the answer is
Not real.
Fortunately enough.
Yes.
Right, yet. Okay, so we're three in, and we're all still level. So can I ask, has anybody, we did actually send out things saying, has anybody got their own scenario that they know would be real or not real? And just checking, did anybody bring one?
I had to look for some, I didn't really. There weren't scenarios and some still just ethical dilemmas.
Okay.
Is that
It's, no, we're looking for scenario to say, is it real or is it not real? So, sure. We can talk about the ethical dilemmas in the pub. Okay, so we're going to go on for number 4 then.
Okay. You work for a stock trading firm that offers systems that support both in-house traders and external day traders. The head of trading asks for a 1-second delay to be introduced into the stock feeds supplied to day traders compared to those supplied to the in-house traders, so the in-house trading systems will always have the advantage over the day traders.
Does it take
Would you
one
like
to do this one?
So, you both chosen?
Yeah. I'm going real.
Real. It is, unfortunately, sadly, real. This came out as part of there's a whole bunch of hassle about high frequency trading a couple of years ago. Came out as part of that there's at least one major clearinghouse was actually introducing it intentionally into its feeds to allow its people to, in fact, could buy the fact that you got the data before other people.
They put a stop to that now, though.
I'm sure they have, yes. Yeah.
Do you know which company that was?
You can look it up. Right. So, I think so. Where we are at the moment. So is that the 4th one? Is that the 4th one? Right. Okay. So we've got one. So we've got one left, and Vince is actually right on point here because because.
Oh yeah.
Yes, the audience.
Yeah.
So there is 1 point difference here.
Yeah.
So it's all to play for still.
Yeah.
I do have one for a tiebreaker if you want.
Okay. Well, let's see how this 5th one goes then.
Okay. So, your team has developed some facial recognition software and has suggested that it will be useful to use it to recognise the likelihood of criminal behaviour.
Ask the audience.
Okay. So you're gonna. Okay, well, you know everything you know? Yeah, okay. So this could, let's level it out here. Okay, so ask the audience. So, do you think it's real?
Real. Definitely real.
Do you think it's not real?
Oh.
So what are you going to go for then?
Real.
Real?
It's real.
Real? It's real!
It's a tiebreaker.
It wins by a point. I'm sorry, I can't see audience. Sorry. We don't even know what it is. Okay, so, right. So.
Okay. I purchased some software which means that I can see all of the cards in an online game of poker, allow me to know if I've got the best hand or not against other real players.
So it's the question that you would ask unethically, or?
So this software exists.
Does this software?
Does this software exist?
And I'll go for it. I'm
I
ready.
think I know.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's real.
Real.
Doesn't exist anymore, but it did.
Is it like so it's the level,
I think it's
so it's going to be a draw. So we don't go to penalties, unfortunately. Thank you very much. So, learnt. Yeah, just checking. Right. So, one of the things, one of the things I found interesting, again, the difference in run this time around, is that people came up with a lot of good suggestions about addressing the individual scenarios. Running it previously, people tended to come up with more generic things about what they could do. And one of the things that came through on this, if you actually take out some of the patterns in here, is about sunlight being the best disinfectant, making things visible. And that's whether that's within your team or whether that's within a wider organisation or wider society. That's one of the definite approaches to ethical and moral concerns. If you're interested in doing more research on this and looking into stuff, if you look at things like ethical black box, so when we're getting into things like AI and automated cars and this sort of thing, part of the thing is like, okay, well, what happened? Why did that car, that self-driving car, hit that person but not that person? And it's decision making and that sort of thing. You need the people looking at producing things like black boxes like they have on aircraft, but to record like the decision making process that was involved in self-driving cars and other sort of similar AI-based systems. There's things like social contract thinking, where you've got to say, okay, well, what, actually starting to look at what sort of rule set you're working within. So, what is your implicit or explicit social contract with the people around you, the groupings you're in, the teams you're in, the organisations you're in. And there's some practical stuff that relates to this. If you look at Danny Ariely, who's done various TED Talks, he talks about sort of on the ethical side of ethical system design, honest cultures, and growth mindsets around the way you balance the outcomes and the ethics and morals around that. And he's got some templates and toolkits on, if you look him up on his website, that can help you actually form an ethical agreement for your team, for example, or for your organisation. You can actually help you define where you as a group see the boundaries to things. In the same way as you would define, at a more trivial level, probably definition of done and that sort of thing. If you can agree these sort of things, why not agree larger boundaries? And also, do your own research. So all the stuff about ethics, moral dilemmas, cognitive biases. We've explored various of these over time in XPMan Manchester. You look around for this sort of stuff. There is plenty out there, and interesting stuff. So we're done. Okay. Thank you very much.